Life is complex.
So is our mental health. It cannot be understood by diagnosis alone.
Our philosophy is treat the person, not the mental illness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humanizing Mental Health. I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
And I'm Trent Akers.
Today, we are joined by Joe Dillon. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we wanted to tell the audience, really express why it was we wanted you on our show. And so we're going to share actually a portion of the pitch that was given to us. So the pitch starts, "I'll be direct," which I love. I like directness. And it's probably going to be part of your power up method as well, right? Directness is probably part of it. So I'd love to get Joe Dillon on Humanizing Mental Health because he can give your listeners something useful, not just something interesting. He's an author and relationship negotiation expert at the Power Up Method with nearly 20 years mediating more than 1,000 couples in high conflict. His work is practical, funny, built to lower distress before people hit a wall. So right now I understand, of course, that you built this method through practice, wisdom, and we'll get into that, but that you're also actually in process of creating a book, which is to come.
It is, yeah. And I've learned that writing a book is a lot harder than it looks. And I myself am an avid reader, so I'll probably read 50 to 60 books a year easily. And now after having tried to write one, there's a certain amount of guilt that I have of how quickly I go through books. Because now I want to look at each page and savor every word and be like, wow, this person probably spent so, so it's like, okay, sorry to every single author I have ever read. My apologies in advance. So,
I'm just imagining it's almost like people who always watch movies, but they've never actually made one themselves. And then you actually really appreciate it. So, yeah. So, I'm curious because, a little bit before the show, we were talking about potential names for the book. And one potential name you'd mentioned was "You're Doing It Wrong," which I think sometimes, I'm just imagining if I'm perusing a bookshelf, that would just make me go, because as a therapist, I go, that's not how I would start things. But if I'm a reader, it's like, okay, wait, am I doing it wrong? What does doing it wrong mean? I think we all know what it can kind of look like, but tell me a little bit more about what that means to you.
Yeah, certainly. So that's kind of our internal working title. And part of it is, when you think about communication, we all have different styles, but in my experience, people tend to fall into, at least in my world, in the divorce space, in the marital relationship space, there's probably two main types that I run across. And one of the types is sort of what I'll call the top of mind person. They're the person who's going to give you the breathless download on every single detail of everything that's absolutely has happened in their life over the last 15 minutes. And then you've got what I call the deep thinker, who's the person who is currently ensconced in some article, book, painting, staring off into the distance. And they're in their own world. And it's a common pattern in my work to see those two kinds of people come together. And so communicating when you're in those kinds of patterns is hard because the deep thinker, and I am, by the way, that person in my relationship where I'll be reading a newspaper, or I'll have a cup of coffee and I'll be looking down at whatever I'm engrossed in. And my wife, who's a top of mind person, who will come in and just say, oh my gosh, before I forget to tell you, we have to go to the store on Friday because we need fertilizer for the fruit trees and the irrigation is leaking. And I'm just like, it's 6:30 in the morning. I got my coffee. I'm like, whoa, I'm still on the first sentence of this thing I'm reading, right? And so part of it is recognizing what kind of person you are so that you can approach your spouse at the appropriate time. So that's kind of where the hook of "you're doing it wrong" came, because it's like, you're doing it right in your world, but according to the other person, this is not how you should approach me.
So as I hear that, to kind of give context, just so that maybe if I'm understanding it properly, it almost sounds a little bit like love languages, in the sense that where it's about, you need to almost find that mutual love language or communicate with your spouse in the language that they understand and they can communicate with you. Is that right?
Actually, it's a lot different than that. With the love languages, that's sort of you're acknowledging the other person and trying to speak to them in their language. I'm saying that if you both agree to use a framework, then it doesn't matter your love language or who you are. If you agree that we're going to follow this power up methodology that says this is how we're going to conduct our conversations, then we're all at least we're all speaking the same language. We're all singing from the same songbook. What I tried to do with the methodology is I tried to make it applicable whether you are the person with the request or the person on the receiving end. And so I'm trying to show people, because a lot of times, right, as a negotiator, as a professional negotiator, I found myself in situations where I've been very prepared. I've entered the negotiation. I've done all my research. And then there are times where negotiations have been sprung upon me. And it's like, well, okay, I have no context for this, but now I'm in it. So I need to be able to get through this and come to a result. And that's really where I think a lot of us get caught off guard, because in conversations, right, if you think about a couple of, in a romantic relationship, the person who initiates the conversation is ready for it. They're the one talking, right? They say, hey, I want to talk to you about our vacation plans. The other person might be like, oh, I didn't even know we were going on vacation. So that's what this also tries to do, is it tries to give people a way to bring the conversation up in a structured way, but also react to it in a structured way, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Something that you said there that really jumped out at me was you talked about timing
Yeah.
and and that being a really critical part, and that my ears really perked up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about that as you talk about timing. Like what has your experience kind of driven you towards understanding about that?
Certainly. Yeah. Great question. When, as I just shared, when someone brings something up, they're ready to talk about it now. They've been thinking about it. Most of us, when we have something we want to talk to our significant other about, it's usually not something that just popped up. It's something that if it's something of consequence, right? If we say we want to renovate the kitchen, we're not just going to one day wake up and go, you know what? I want to tear this whole thing apart. They've probably been looking at it for a while and saying, boy, oh boy, this counter is chipped and this is that. And right. And so we're ready. If we're that person, we're ready for the conversation. Now, you're assuming the other person is ready at that point. But if, for example, they're like me, a deep thinker, there's a lot of information they're going to need to have in advance in order to have that conversation. And I use the kitchen example because that is actually an example my wife and I had done, is that she's more of a, let's get this done, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, what are my choices for kitchen cabinets? What colors do the doors come in? Like, I need information before I can even entertain this conversation. So being able to know that conversation type, but also going in, if your spouse in this example might say, listen, whoa, I'm open to talking about this, but I'm not ready to talk about it now. How does that person, like in this case, me, get my spouse to feel heard, but not rejected? Because now it might become a question of, so you don't want to renovate the kitchen? This is why I never talk to you, because you never listen to me. And it's like, whoa, time out. It's not that I don't want to listen to you or I don't want to renovate the kitchen. I just happen to be underneath the sink right now fixing a leaky pipe, and now might not be the greatest time to talk to me about that. So that's what I mean about timing.
Right. So it's not so much that you see somebody and you go, I think that they're ready for me to talk about this. It's a deeper process in which is like, I understand who my spouse is. I understand that I'm going to need to bring this up, and then we're going to need to set an agenda for this to be discussed.
Yeah, and one of the things that I like to offer is what I call a gentle redirect. So I'll take my own relationship, for example. My wife Cheryl is very top of mind, and she's really good at details. I myself happen to be more of like a 50,000-foot big picture kind of guy. So take the kitchen, for example. I just want to know that there's going to be a door that I open to get to the pots, right? I don't care what color it is, what kind of knob is on, right? None of that matters, but it matters to her. So if she wants to share with me all the doorknob styles, there's a part of me that's going to go, why, right? Why do I need to know this? But there's also a part of me that knows it's important to her. And so rather than say, I don't care, you pick out the doorknob, which she might take as, well, he doesn't really care about this project, by offering up a gentle redirect, you can put yourself in the position when you're ready. So for example, I might say, wow, that seems like a lot of choices. And I want to be really ready to hear the choices, and I want to be fresh to look at them with a fresh set of eyes. Do you mind if we grab some time tomorrow morning? Because maybe it's 7 o'clock at night on a Tuesday where you've had your work day, right? Hey, can we grab some time
Yeah.
tomorrow? What do you say we grab an hour tomorrow morning around 8 and we'll look at the doorknobs together? So you've gotten what you needed by kind of deflecting the conversation, but you've also pulled your spouse in and shared with them that you're interested, you want to hear it, you want to be engaged, but maybe just not right now. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that specifically because if somebody in the relationship is anxious, right, then you're giving them that ability to address that anxiety on
right,
either side. Because I think sometimes that's with a lot of the people that I've worked with, that anxiety can be something that they're like, okay, I either want to deal with it right now or I need to
right.
process it. So let's set a time for that. Like let's actually schedule it.
Yeah. And in that anxiety, also, sometimes I experience that there's a fear of the unknown. There's an openness and, an unknown piece to it. And one of the things that I also talk about in this book is it's about not, it sounds a little more, a little more like obnoxious than it's meant to come across, but it's like give someone homework, meaning if someone comes to you and they really want to talk about something, sometimes they're verbal processors, right? So they want to keep talking about it out loud. And I myself, for example, I'm not a verbal processor. I'm more of a give me information, let me go away, think about it, and come back to you. So by saying to the person, for example, who might be coming to you, say, that's great. And again, I'll use the kitchen example because it worked really well with my wife and I, where she's like, well, what kind of door style do you want? Because we have to let the contractor know, they have to order them. It takes 6 weeks to come in. Like, she's on me and I'm going, I don't know what kind of door style. What? So I said to her, I said, listen, I'll tell you what, how about this? Why don't you go gather up the different types of door styles, pick 3 styles that you like, and I'll pick one from those, right? So she's like, okay, right? So she's now got something to do. So she feels like I'm engaged. She feels like she's making progress towards her goal. And we're also going to have a situation where we both like the same item, right? We both came to an agreement because she picked 3 she likes. I pick one of them, then all of a sudden now we've got what we call a win-win, right? And that's how by giving that homework, it's not meant to sound like you're some teacher and you're trying to do some lesson or waste somebody's time. It's like, look, bring me information that I can use to help expedite this decision.
And you find that what happens is conflict is diffused before it ever begins.
Right. Yeah, because now the other person feels validated, right? We want to be acknowledged and validated. We want to be heard. Like, we want this other person to feel like, hey, you know what? You're going to be eating and cooking in this kitchen too. I want you to be a part of it, even though maybe I
Yeah.
don't want to be part of it. But I want to show that I, as a good spouse and a good partner, I'm involved. And that's exactly what we did. She made a little PowerPoint presentation for me with little pictures of the door styles and showed me the different colors they come in. And it was great. I was like, wow. And I said to her, I was like, this is exactly what I needed, because we were able to make a decision right then and there. We picked our door, we picked our color, we picked our doorknobs, and then she could now go off and order the doors and work with the contractor. And then she'd come back when the next round of decisions needed to be made, and we would continue the process that way. So it works really well as long as you kind of, you both can integrate with each other in that way, as opposed to the other person. You have to be willing, right? As we all know as professionals, when it comes to counseling and when it comes to if you have couples, you need 2 willing participants, right? You can't have somebody who
Exactly.
got dragged there and the other person's like, sitting in the chair like the whole time, right?
Really, yeah, for sure. Like, really, as you were describing this, I went, what was happening between you? Yeah, you're going to renovate a kitchen. You don't want to demolish your relationship while you renovate a kitchen.
Right, exactly. Because it
Yeah.
happens. We are, right? There's always those big projects, people buy houses or renovate houses, and boy, the money starts flying out the window, and before you know it, you're fighting about who knows what, and you're getting on each other. You wanted this house. This was your fault, right? It's the blame game, as opposed to, why aren't we working together to solve this problem that we have no kitchen in our house and we need one? Right? So
Yeah, and I really like this too because it gives you a framework, which then they can actually do something structural. But then you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Joe. But then
Yeah.
once you have that, then you can start to do like a lot of the more deeper processing parts of it that are maybe underlying that in therapy. But if they do run into an issue, then you can unpack it a lot more easier rather than as a therapist where you're having to do that stabilization. Am I
Yeah,
wrong?
right. Yeah, you want to get right. You have to get people on a place where they're at least on solid ground, right? You can't like there's a saying, I think it's like I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me if I get it incorrectly. But like when I think about a lifeguard and you've got a person flailing, right? They're more
Hmm.
likely to drown the lifeguard because they're, flailing around. So the lifeguard's first job is to throw them the ring and calm them, right? Even though they're wasting air quotes time that this person is struggling, that's the only way the lifeguard's going to be able to get them to shore is to get them to stop and pause. And conversations are a lot like that as well because as we all know from our professions, they can spiral quickly. And we want to get them to a place that are on level ground. And as a negotiator, I'm always looking for the end game, right? I'm always looking for what's the outcome I want to get to. What is it that I want out of this? What does this person want out of this? And that leads me to something else that I think is important is that in a negotiation, one of the things that a lot of us do, and I tease myself a lot about this because I'm an only child, I have no siblings. And I always would say, like, sure, anything is fine as long as I get what I want. I get my way, right? So when you go into a negotiation, what's happening is you've already got in your head what it is you want. Guess what? Newsflash. The other person has absolutely no reason to give you what you want, right? Why? Like
Mm.
it's what you want. It's not what they want. It might be, but you don't know that. So as a professional, as a negotiator, when I go in, I'm also ready and willing and prepared to offer something to the other party to get what
Mm.
it is I want. So it might be using the kitchen example. I'll tell you what, if we can get the cabinets in white instead of brown or whatever, then you can pick the hinges and the doorknobs, right? So it's a give and a get. And that's using that negotiation philosophy where it's like, okay, that's what I call reward with value in the power up method is that if I'm going to ask you for something, I need to be able to offer you something on plane in return, something of similar or equal value.
Hmm. Interesting. Like I almost wonder about this. Like one thing that I work with couples with all the time is like trying to do things where they're building up quality time and spending time together. I'm wondering for that if that would almost be something that would work there, like where you choose the restaurant, but maybe I let you choose the activity.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the examples in my book is that you say, look, if we're going to do this together, then it's got to be the product of both of us. And it can't be like, that's why I use dinner and a movie as a perfect example. Okay, I'm going to choose an Italian restaurant. And maybe your spouse is like, oh man, I just had pizza for lunch and I had spaghetti last night. And it's like, but I'm going to let you choose the movie. And if you choose some foreign film that's in French and I don't speak French, but you do, well, I chose the restaurant. So I said you could choose the movie. I can't complain that you chose a movie that you wanted to go to because you're going to a restaurant I want to go to. And that's all part of that process is recognizing that, you get along to get along. And it does require, and that's, I think, a great example because those two items are on par with each other. I'll give you an example of what I mean of the opposite. So let's say this is a good one. This one happens a lot in my practice. Let's say now I come along and I say to my wife, I want to quit my job and I want to start a business. Now, my wife might look at me and say, well, wait a minute, we're a two-income household. We have all these bills. We have this mortgage. We have these car payments. How are we going to do this? And if I come back with, don't worry about it, forget it, whatever, they're probably thinking like, what is he going to do? Is he going to sit around all day? Does he think that like money's going to appear out of nowhere? So I might have to offer something where I say, listen, I'd like to quit my job to start a business. I'm going to give it 3 months. If I don't turn a profit in 3 months, I will go back to work. And here's the kicker. And while I am starting my business, I will take care of 100% of the household chores. So you see, so I brought in a different thing to get what I want, even though it wasn't, well, you can quit your job too, right? That doesn't really help us. But I'm acknowledging to the other party that says, well, gee, I realize you're probably going to have to work harder. You're probably going to be more under stress at your job because you're the only income earner. So I want to offer you something to alleviate that. And that, in my example, is I'll take care of the kids. I'll do pack the lunches. I'll bring them to the activities. I'll take care of the cleaning and the laundry around the house. So you're trying to offer something that's at or above value of the thing you're asking for. So I hope that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah,
I don't know.
totally does. Like something that jumped out at me as you're describing this is something actually I learned very, very early in my academic life. The rule of reciprocity.
Right.
That it's like what you really want to do in a good way, in a positive way,
Mm-hmm.
is like have the idea that it's like, hey, I'm going to put you into my debt. Like because we're going to have this reciprocity that happens between us. There'll be an expectation that I feel a level of I need to reciprocate, and there'll be an expectation from the other side. They feel they need to reciprocate, and there becomes this synergistic positive forward movement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I call that the marriage bank is the kind of the euphemism I use because whether you realize it or not, as a couple, you're either making deposits or you're making withdrawals. And the whole idea is, as you're just saying, is to keep adding to that deposit and adding that balance because inevitably there's going to be some hard time, right? Someone's going to lose a job, a death of a parent, an illness, a kid gets in trouble at school, and there's going to be an event in your life that could cause the two of you to, go at each other, right? To kind of turn at each other. And if this balance is high and you're both like, well, you know what? We're on really solid footing. We've got a really high bank balance, air quotes, bank balance. Then we can use that to weather the storm. And like a lot of us, right? Nobody's perfect every single day. We all have our moments. And there are times where, your spouse says something to you and it comes across as kind of obnoxious or cross. But if you've got a good enough balance in that marriage bank and you're looking at each other, you can say, you know what? I know they're a great person. Something must just be going on for them today, and I'm going to just cut them some slack. And that actually happened this weekend. And my wife came to me and said, look, sorry, it's not you. I just haven't slept in a couple of days. We both came back from vacation. We're both sick, coughing our heads off all night. She's like, I haven't slept in 3 days. She's like, I'm just exhausted. I'm like, no, I knew that already. You didn't even have to tell me that. So that's what having this good reciprocity and that good, strong balance does for you. It allows those other items to just kind of fall by the wayside because you realize just how unimportant they are.
So I'm curious, when with couples, like, because we've talked about like one or two examples. I'm just wondering, like, with a chain where it comes to like something like this, like where it's beyond like one or two examples, how far have you seen people go with this method? Like in
Yeah.
terms of like giving back and forth, does it work?
Yeah. So, I mean, I practice it all the time. And what's really funny is my friends know me having, been in this game, I call it the negotiation game for the past 30 years. All of them kind of look at me with some sort of like suspicious eye because they're like, all right, I know as soon as I get in a conversation with him, it's going to wind up exactly where he wanted it. So I'm going to just play. I'm going to play and see what happens. Right. So,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
even Cheryl, my wife is always like, all right, what kind of little voodoo hoodoo is he going to pulling on me here right now? So, but I do find that some people do certain parts of it. Not everyone perhaps does it start to back. And that's what I want to try to explain to people is that you don't necessarily have to execute all 7 steps of the method in order for this to work. But there are some parts of that are more critical than others. And there are some that are game changers for people that even if you only did 1 or 2 of them, I promise you it changes your whole way you interact with people. So do people do all these 7 steps? If they're professional negotiators, they probably do. If you're like a hostage negotiator or a mediator like me, you're using this as a playbook. But more often than not, the general public isn't. And a lot of why I wanted to write this book is I wanted to share in very practical terms, right? The 3 of us, we're academics by heart. We're well-studied people. We read research papers for fun. We're an unusual bunch, right? But
There.
cool, look, the latest clinical study came out. Yay, let's check this out, right? But most people don't want to do that. They just want to know, Joe, it's Tuesday. I got to figure out how I can get my wife to say I can go to Vegas with my friends, right? And that's what this is trying to share with them. It's for the everyday conversations that crop up, that trip people up. And that's really what we're trying to try to help them do.
So I'm curious with these, because like one thing that you said right there, my wife let me go to Vegas. So I'm wondering, is there a point where people could almost use these where you're almost not negotiating in good faith? And what does that do to the system?
Well, you're always in my world negotiating a good faith, because the way the methodology works is that part of it is you have to give to get. So if the give isn't as strong as the ask, then it's probably going to fall down. And to your question, one of the things that often happens, and we'll all laugh at this because I know right now, after I say this, you're all going to think of a friend or a colleague or a person that does this, and you're ready for this. Think about the person in your life who they say, hey, we should get together sometime. Think about that person. I've got them in my head. You're smiling. You've got them in your head too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you gotten together with that person? No. It's been months since they said we should get together. That's because you kicked the can down the road. Part of this methodology works is because it says, listen, I'll use the Vegas example. I want to go to Vegas, to the Sphere, and see this concert with my buddies. I know it's a lot. We have 2 little kids. I want to leave on Friday and I want to come home on Monday. I understand that's a lot. Here's what I want to offer you in exchange. I know there's this spa you and your girlfriends have been talking about going away to. Let's right now pull out the calendar, because I already have the Vegas dates, in my head. I know when the concert is. Let's pull out the calendar right now and book that trip for you. Right now, let's do that, or block that weekend. And then by doing it right at that moment, it reinforces that's how willing I am to give you that. Not, hey, yeah, sure. I'll tell you what, when I get back, we can talk about you maybe going away. No, you want to say, look, you pick the weekend, you pick the destination, you want to lock it in now, or you want a credit on account, you got it. And it's like, again, it's got to be equal, not like, oh, and I'll bring home a pizza on Friday in exchange for you letting me go to Vegas for 4 days. It's like, no, that's not of equal or greater value, right? That's something you just do on a Friday, right? So that's the whole idea.
So, Joe, one of the things that really jumps out at me as you describe this is, of course, you built this from years of mediation, years of helping people negotiate. And in my mind, I'm flipping through like the different therapeutic methodologies that exist out there, and this is very different. It's important for me to point that out.
Yeah,
That there's
thanks.
some very unique things about this in particular, because the specific formulation of negotiation as a way to improve your relationship, I don't think that I've seen that particular, what's the word, that platform
Yeah.
to jump off of.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because before I got down this particular rabbit hole, I did a lot of research and I read a lot of books, and some of them I've already read. So for example, I'm a big fan of Gottman. So, I just in my line of work, I read those books just so I can, not that by any stretch of the imagination, I always tell people, I'm like, I am in no way, shape or form a mental health professional. Let me just be abundantly clear about that. But I want to walk the walk and talk the talk a little bit enough so that if someone is in therapy and comes into mediation and talks that stuff, I can say, yes, I am familiar with the 4 horsemen, for example. So that's one of my favorite things. And so I want to be able to talk that enough that I'm educated on it, but not that I'm a professional. And so when I went out and I saw that, Jeremy, I was like, there is this gap. And one thing I will say, and I'm saying this among, friendly company here, is that I, in my experience, have encountered somewhat of a resistance to the word therapy or counseling. And I'm a big fan of therapy and counseling. I'm always like, listen, you got some things you got to work through, man. Like, whether you know it or not, just do yourself a favor and just go. Like, just go try a few sessions, right? Like, just give it a shot. And then once you get into it, maybe you'd see it, right? But there is sometimes a stigma about that. And so what I'm trying to do is also remove that stigma a little bit and say, look, we're going to use negotiation techniques to improve your communication, to improve your relationship. And then there are going to be other things that you're going to need to unpack in therapy that are more in line with those modalities, that are not just about having effective conversations. They're about, your childhood, your past, deep-seated hurts, repeating patterns. I can't unpack all of that in a 7-step methodology, but what I can do is give people. I liken it to going to the gym, right? A lot of people, when they work out, I like to exercise. And you see all those people, they join the gym in January and they're gone by like February, March, right? Because they're like, well, I worked out once last week and I didn't lose 50 pounds and I don't have rippling muscles. It's like, yeah, you have to work out for like 6 months, 9 months, a year before you start getting any results. And so this is at least one of those ways where I'm like, well, this is something you can apply quick, that you can see that, yes, you can improve your relationship. You can pull it back from the brink. So this relationship is worth investing in and worth working on. And then we'll use therapy to kind of, do those other things, and then really collectively together have a strong foundation. So that's how I look at it. That's really, it's important that it's kind of one piece of the puzzle, because you can't build a house with only a screwdriver, right? You need a saw and a hammer and and all the other things that in order to build that strong house. And that's how I view it.
Yeah, if I could follow up with a comment on that as you described it, is one of the things that is troubling about actual couples counseling or couples therapy is that people have let those problems fester, and the Gottman stuff, for like 7 years before they've ever gone in to address stuff. Actually, one of the most likely, or probably the most likely outcome for someone coming in for couples counseling or therapy is for the relationship to end.
Yeah.
That's actually the most likely outcome.
Yep.
And a lot because of what you talked about before about where people at, where's their readiness? Is someone being drugged into this?
Mhm.
And so as you were describing this to me sounded like very practical strategies that you could begin to apply to your relationship immediately without needing to talk about your childhood trauma. Because maybe when you're in a bad place, you don't trust your partner to tell them about the vulnerable things, and they're not going to listen to it at the time because they got
100%.
too much caught up in their own emotional state towards you.
Yeah, and that's part of when we were thinking about, we were talking about communication, and this is where negotiation therapy blend, is that I need to know it's safe to talk to you. If I'm going to approach you with something, if you're going to bite my head off, there's no way I'm coming near you. And by the way, in a negotiation, even if I was negotiating over like property rights, it would be the exact same thing. I've been in some situations where, prior to me being in the divorce space, but in the corporate negotiation space, where you get on the speakerphone and you've got your legal team and they've got their legal team, and the first words out of the mouth of the other person is, I just want to let you know that we're not giving you an inch. You're like, what am I doing here? Right? Like, like this person is not even on the planet, I'm like, I might as well just hang up. Interpersonal relationships are the same. If I walk up to you every single time, and every time I go to, hey, Jeremy, you want to go to the movies? He's like, Joe, I don't see movies. You're stupid for even asking me that. I'm not going to ask Jeremy to hang out anymore. I'm going to be like, well, he's kind of mean, like, I don't want to talk to him. And we want people to have wins. And I'll tell you this as a quick aside. One of the things that's somewhat rewarding and sad at the same time, when I'm helping a couple divorce and I'm going through the divorce process with them, I will use these techniques. And then they'll agree on a whole bunch of stuff. And then they'll look at me and one person will say, man, I wish you were in our living room. And you're like, yeah. And they're like, yeah, if you had been in our house during our marriage, we might not be here right now. And then I say to them, well, the ink isn't dry here. Like, we're not pro-divorce. We're anti-conflict as mediators. Any shot you can save it. And every so often you'll get somebody who does. And I don't hear back from them. So that's good, right? That means they don't need me again. But part of it is teaching them. And I said, even if you decide to go through with the divorce, this will be a way you can communicate moving forward. So when you're co-parenting, or you see each other at family events, or there's alimony being paid, it's not going to burn you up inside. You can at least have this controlled, structured way to talk to each other. And that's part of what I kind of also thought about developing this methodology, because it's the same kind of thing that I help couples. When you think about couples who are divorcing, they're immediately at odds, right? They want to end their marriage and they want to get as much as they can. as a mediator, I'm fortunate in that I've had basically 98% of my client couples come to agreement. And a lot of that has to do with how I get them to talk to each other and talk to me. And I get them to recognize they need to give to get, that they need to be respectful, that they need to do this in a structured way. And when they do, they look back and they're like, wow, this wasn't as terrible as I thought it would be. And I'm like, that's kind of one of the highest compliments I can get as a divorce mediator, right? This didn't suck as bad as I thought it would. So,
Yeah. And Joe, I really love that you say that because I've done some couples counseling where it ends up being in divorce and where you have to work with a couple now on co-parenting. And one of the
right.
most vital steps that I find is after you get through like the parenting agreement and all that jazz, it's about how did they get to the point where they're willing to show value and reciprocity and want the best for their former spouse for the
Yep.
life they have afterwards. And if they
Right.
have that structure in that agreement, that step sounds like that's vital step would be so much easier.
I intentionally, when I write my agreements, I intentionally put a hyphen in the word cooperation. And I say co-hyphen operation. And I emphasize it. I say, you have to together operate.
Uh,
Right. And they kind of look at you like, okay, this guy's a little, but it's on purpose to get them to say
yes.
exactly that. You've got to work together. Your kids are counting on it. Like there's no question. You brought them into this world. You need to raise them regardless of your marital status, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is powerful. I got one more like critical question.
Okay. Hit me.
So the choice of power up. Tell us how that came into being.
Yeah. So I tried thinking of the steps that I take people through in conversations. And I also, as a practitioner, I remember this is going back almost 30 years. Yeah, 30 years at this point. Geez, wow. So I went to the Harvard program on negotiation, and I remember sitting in that classroom at Harvard and I'm just staring at the professor and staring at the whiteboard or whatever, the projector, whatever, because it's 30 years ago. So it's probably more like slides and stuff with an overhead projector, but I'm just like, what the hell does all this mean? Like he's got all the BATNA and WATNA and graphs and charts and arrows, and you're just like, I can't remember any of this. So now I'm going to ask a layperson to try to distill 30 years of my experience into a conversation that's happening on the fly.
Yeah.
How can I do this and give them something that they can remember? And so I wanted to come up with something that was easy to remember, that follows the steps, and it also kind of is indicative of, listen, power up your conversations. You want to bring some energy to it. You want to improve these. You want to succeed, right? You want to come to some good conclusion. And so that's where I came up with. And if if you go to the site, I have a little website. It's powerupmethod.com, and it outlines the 7 steps and what each of them means, like in real brief. And then that's where you can also sign up for our little newsletter. And when you look at it, you'll see each of the 7 steps, each of the letters is a step in the process. And if you follow them in order, you'll get through the end. And like I said, you don't have to execute all of them. In a perfect world, you'll do them all. It's what's nice about it is that it's not, I have to do step 1, then I wait. Step 2, then I wait. A lot of the steps are meant to sort of roll into each other and then be able to give you the outcome. And so that's how I came up with it. I actually, the really at the end of the day, what it boiled down to was I had helped develop a mediation program for high school kids, peer mediation for a school in Princeton, New Jersey. And I was thinking about when we worked together with the kids about how we applied very adult techniques to the way high schoolers talk. And so I said, well, I'm going to just treat adults the same way. Give them something catchy, give them some methodology, something that they can sink their teeth into and remember because it worked with the kids. So why won't it work with adults? And that's where I came up with it. I had to work really hard to get the letters to work, but after I did, I was like, okay, I got it. And you'll see on the website each of the 7 steps and what they mean.
Perfect. That is awesome.
Yeah.
So Trent, what are you thinking?
Well, honestly, I love this. I think I would definitely say that this is a great stabilization technique I think that if more couples came with these skills already before they got into couples counseling, you'd be able to hit the ground running. So as a therapist, I think that this is something I'd love every couple to have before they come in and see me.
Yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
saying that.
absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Like, I'll be super frank that, so I don't work with couples at this point in time.
Sure.
I don't do couples therapy.
Right.
The only couples work I would do is when people are deploying and I'm screening them, I need to see the family, but
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is not the same. But I have lots of military members that struggle relationally, and I'll be honest, I always have in the back of my head the most likely outcome is for the relationship to end. That's
Yeah.
always in the back of my head as a possible risk. So just being able to say, "Oh, you're having conflict, go do couples counseling," is actually something that isn't the first thing I say to people. I try to work with them from their side and
Yeah.
understanding. But I would be more than happy to say, hey, there's a skill set that would probably be very helpful for you, and to be able to say, I want you to go to this website. I want you to check out the power up method.
Yeah.
See if you can start to use these things and honestly see how that begins to change the dance in your relationship as you start to use these things. Maybe you can
Yeah.
even integrate your partner over time to say, "Hey, I've been trying this new skill set," and uh, and I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, wow,
Yeah.
that's very kind. I really appreciate that because I came at it, so just so you guys know, a lot of the pattern I see, a lot of the clients I see in my work where we have a high-level executive. It's usually the gentleman, it's not always. We have some high-level women as well, but typically it's the man who's the high-level executive, and then the wife is either working inside the home or has, a retail job or works in the school or something like that. And so the gentleman is trying to apply his CFO level analytical skills to what's going on in their relationship. And, like, I mean, that could work, sort of, right? So this framework is kind of in a way calling that person out and saying, look, you can be your analytical self, but you can also add some other softer touches to get a more favorable response from your spouse, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of it too. And what you just shared, Jeremy, about the military guys, I would think military folk are very analytical, very process oriented, very regimented. So it would think, and I really appreciate you saying this, it would seem to me that they would really respond well to something structured like this that would get results and give them a direction and have an outcome, a positive outcome, right? That leads, that's what the goal is, to lead to a positive outcome.
They are definitely regimented, given that they're in a regiment.
Yeah. 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 And I know that you're just coming out with your book, but as I think about this too, I almost think about like family therapy, working with kids, because I'm seeing that this can almost be great application for teenagers and parents to like
Yeah.
learn these skills early on.
Man, oh my God, I can't believe Chen, you said that because when I first sat with, it's a friend who was helping me as a consultant, a book consultant, and I sat with him and I had all these ideas, and I was just like, "Wow," his name is David, and I'm like, David, I got this, and da 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 da, and one of them was exactly that because it would be funny to pitch this to kids and say, how many times do you ask your parents for something and they say no? Well, what if I could teach you a way for them to say yes, right? The kids would be like, well, I'm listening, right? Like all of us did. Like, how can I get my mom to let me stay out late, right? So, and he said, I think it's a great idea. He's like, but you're a divorce mediator first. And I think your first book in the series is that it's focusing on married couples. Then that's your next book is for kids. And it's so funny you brought that power up for teens because look, we all see conflict in our world, right? We all see what's going on. And I think all three of us would agree that if people just knew how to communicate with each other, we would not be in the mess we are in. Like, it's not that hard, people. Be nice, be polite, be respectful, listen to the other side, right? It's like all this stuff, this basic stuff, but if it's not natural to people, okay. All right, fine, no problem. Let's see if we can give you some structure to at least in your own world to make that bubble safe. And so that'll be the sequel book. So I'll come back on the show when I've got the next book aimed at teens, and I'll put you guys in the forward, okay? So I will give you credit for that, I promise.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, man.
That's amazing. You're using your stuff on us right now.
There
That
you
was that
go.
was a big give.
Little
We
Yeah.
gotta
Jedi
lean
mind
back
trick.
into giving back, man. We
Yeah,
gotta lean
see
back
that.
in.
That's it, man. That's how I pull the Jedi mind tricks. I kind of
So,
lure you in, right? You're not sure what's happening. Hey, wait a minute. Why are we eating the restaurant and seeing the movie he wants? How did this happen? You know, you'll have a
So
fun time.
there's one thing. Can I, as we begin to wrap things up,
Yeah.
there's one thing that really does jump out at me, and that has to do with kind of what you bring as a person. This is
mm,
always interesting. So yeah, I got to see Dr. David Burns present on cognitive therapy,
Okay.
and as he presented stuff, it was amazing. Except he missed one variable, and that variable was himself. Right?
Yeah.
Like something worked out so well, but part of that was the internal self that he's bringing into it,
Hmm.
and so what stands out to me, and that I'd really want to represent is that it has to be authentic. I'm sure that you talk about that in your process,
Right.
but that it has to come from a place of benevolence. That you're always come from a benevolent position as you're negotiating with your partner. That it's always about coming from a positive space.
Yeah.
Because you can't shift it somehow and manipulate people. That's just will never work. They'll see right
Absolutely.
through it.
Yeah, and that's where the reward with value comes in, because that's what I was saying before. When you say to the other person, you're basically, by offering them something, you're saying, look, I get it. I'll just use the Vegas example. I get it. It's a real big ask that I'm asking you, a full-time working mother of a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, to stay at home for 4 days by yourself with these two kids while I go see my favorite band, go to nightclubs, go out on the town with my buddies. I want you to know that it's not just me saying, "Hey, I want to go to Vegas. You never let me go anywhere." And I want to be able to reward you with something so big at or above that I'm showing you that I'm not just like trying to pull a fast one over on you and go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, you can do something." And so by doing that, and it's so funny when you do that, the other person often, and my reaction often is they're suspicious, because now they're looking at you like, I've been talking about going to a spa for a long time, and we never really had this conversation. And now suddenly you're offering it to me. Why? Right? And that's where, as you just said, Jeremy, you have to kind of say, because I realize just how big an ask this is. I get it. And that's one of the things where when you say there's a step, the W in the power up method is called weigh their perspective. And this, I'll share this with you guys. You can, if you forget everything we talked about today, this is the number one move. Okay. So remember this one. This is separates the amateurs from the pros. When you go into a conversation and you come in, the first thing you do is make the other person's argument for them. It seems so counterintuitive. If I come in and I go, Jeremy, I know you hate Thai food and I know you hate the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but hear me out. I really want to check out this new place that opened downtown, and there's a 7 o'clock show. And if you agree to go with me, I'll pick up dinner in the movie. And then next week we can go, bowling and live animal juggling, because I know you've been wanting to do that for the past 3 months, right?
How did
And
you know
so
I love live animal juggling?
who doesn't, right? Exactly. But you see, what you did is like you were ready. Now Jeremy's got nowhere to go. He goes, well, he knows I don't want to go for Thai, and he knows I don't want to see that Marvel movie. Man, I got no argument left. What did he just do? He took the steam out of this conversation, and he offered me something. He's going to pay for it, and I'm going to get something else. That's where benevolence comes in, right? Because that can kind of come across as manipulative. Like, okay, what is he really? Are we really going to go to the movie, or is he really going to go juggling with me? Like, like you start doubting, and then it's following through on it. Then when we're out there and we've got the squirrels and we're going crazy and, doing whatever we're doing, you're like, wow, Joe's a guy of his word. And that builds up over time. And we all know this from our professions, is that you've got to be a person of your word, and you have to be a person of your word all the time. Because again, right, it builds over. You go, this is a safe person. This is a person I know that if I talk to, I'm gonna get an honest answer. They're gonna follow through. They're gonna do what they said. That that's the person I want to be in a relationship with. That's the friend I want, because we all also have the other friend who says, yeah, I know it's 6:30 and I know I'm supposed to be at the restaurant now, but yeah, I just didn't feel like it. And you're sitting there going, now I'm at this table by myself, right? Looking like a fool. And this person doesn't follow through. So I'm not going to make plans with this person anymore. So that's the one. Remember that one. Weigh their perspective. When you say, and you got to think about it. You got to think about what I use a simple example, but what really is going to be the objection that this person is going to come back with me. I really might have to dig in and think about what it is and posit it to them. And then when they hear that, it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. This person's making my case for me. What are they doing? And that's where the conversation starts. So that's your nugget of the day right there. So use that little trick on your friends and family and report back to me on how it goes.
Sweet. So Trent, I kind of gave my 2 bits. As we wrap things up, what are you thinking?
Well, honestly, like it's really hard to choose just one thing here, Joe. Like the one thing that I really want to take away from this is that like you've walked us through all of these examples, and I think the one thing I want to slam home to our listeners or our watchers, if you're watching some video, is that this is definitely something where the rubber hits the road, and like where it's about how like the give and the get. I think that is something so key for people to negotiate in good faith. And I
Yep.
think that's something that's missing. So that's really my big takeaway from this. And I will definitely be recommending this to my clients.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate that. And I appreciate your real-time feedback because, you sit here in your little bubble and you're writing your book and you think it's the greatest thing that you've come up with in the world, right? And I hope maybe, one day, we'll be on the New York Times bestseller list, or you'll see me on the Today Show and yeah, I remember that guy. But it's just, again, it's like you were saying, I think Jeremy, I think it was you who said this, is that, we all just want to put stuff out in the world. Like, I think all three of us are in helping professions and we're all helpers by nature. And we know that we can't solve the world's ills, but if we can make things better, I'm not a particularly religious guy, but I kind of very much follow that whole Buddhist philosophy of, you throw a stone into the pond and it makes 100 ripples. And if I can be the stone and those ripples can go out and touch people and so on and so forth, that's not a bad way to go. It's not a bad legacy to have. So that's really what I'm trying to do, is just, I've seen the patterns. I want to help people improve their lives, because I've been married 21 years and it hasn't been easy, but it's been very rewarding. And, Cheryl and I, we, fight like elegant diplomats, right? We use these techniques with each other, and, the conversations meander along, but they always get to somewhere positive. And that's what I hope other folks can achieve.
Amazing.
Awesome. Yeah. On that note, I'm Trent Akers.
I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that this message has been as meaningful to you as it has been to us. If you're looking for help, you can find us on Facebook at Humanizing Mental Health.